Hello, everyone. This is Elmer Moore, Executive Director of Scale at Milwaukee and a loyal GMC staffer. And I'm so excited. We're going to feature a conversation today with Chancellor Mark Mone. Mark, say hi.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon and good morning, wherever you are. Hope you're doing well in this highly unusual time.
So let's jump right into it. Mark, this is a situation that none of us has ever seen and none of us were prepared for. How, as the Chancellor, are you navigating this storm?
Well, however I'm navigating it today, I can tell you tomorrow it'll be a little bit different. That's kind of the go phrase right now. It's amazing how fast the change has occurred. There's a number of different dimensions that have affected our students, faculty and staff, as well as the larger community. Everything is disrupted. Nothing is quite certain. So we're navigating through that. And I have to tell you, I'm tremendously proud that our 26,000 students, are more than 4,000 faculty and staff, and more than 4,200 part-time student employees have just weathered this with amazing flexibility and grit. That said, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of people who are concerned and worried about different things. But you know, we've been putting a lot of things in place. I'd be happy to go through and talk categorically about some of the different issues that we're facing. But just in a nutshell, we're holding our own and leading the way in a lot of changed times, and that's certainly the case for all of us.
So let's go through. You've got a constituency of students who are being massively disrupted. How have you accommodated the shift for them?
So what we did, the first thing out of the gate was we recognized the timing was fairly propitious in the sense that we had spring break almost upon us. We immediately said, let's extend spring break. And you know, I had a news conference because we were one of the first campuses to have the possibility of a COVID case. As it turns out, it was negative, fortunately. But we did have something that really helped us accelerate the reality of what's going to happen when this occurs on our campus. So what we did is we extended spring break to allow more time for us to gear up for online learning. We already had 11,000 students online, so we have a lot of built-in systems and mechanisms, but to put all 26,000 students fully online, or in some cases, what we call alternative delivery mechanisms. So imagine if you're in piano, dance, theater, you're in a performing art, it's kind of hard to do that if you need a cast or an ensemble. So figuring out creative ways to come up with alternative ways in a socially distant mode. So that was the first path. And then what we recognized, even as things got more and more serious over the last 14 days, just how we literally had to have everybody off campus and everybody into these modes, creating a lot of problems. You know, not everybody has high-speed internet. Not everybody has access to the internet at home. Many homes are not hospitable for learning as easily. So a lot of those issues we've worked through. So we've got 26,000 students that are effectively able to go online now. This will start next week, but we've got the faculty, we've got a tremendous Center for Education, Technology, and Learning work, things that we're doing, things that we've built, but it's scaling that up immediately. And then, you know, a lot of times your training for this had been in person, classroom, not today, so we've had to move all of that. So there's that piece. And again, as I mentioned at the outset, doing that at scale is something we've made pretty good progress with. Our staff and our faculty talk about heroic, talk about jumping through a lot of hoops, everything from the IT staff, HR, the logistics, with respect to the libraries to enable this. They've been amazing across all three of our campuses that include UWM Waukesha and UWM Washington County, as well as the main campus here. The other category that's huge and logistically continues to be a large matter is that we have dorms, residence halls that house roughly almost 5,000 students. So it's interesting, for a campus of 26,000, we have, you know, not quite 80% off campus. So that's in a way a good thing. But for those students, we had to pretty quickly moved them out, but there's 600 students who had nowhere to go. They live international, they don't have home situations that they can go to. So we're still housing those students, and thanks to the way the governor's order is today, those are essential services that are being provided for those students in terms of meals and accommodations, with high respect to social distancing. And of course, that's the pervasive theme throughout everything, is safety for our students, safety for our faculty and staff in this great time. So the dorms have been huge, because another aspect that has been going on is the state would very much like to have some of our residence halls for quarantining. So we've been working through that with the state, and they are particularly interested in the suites and the rooms with bathrooms, private bathrooms. It doesn't do them any good to have shared bathrooms or quad types of setups. Now, the complicating thing is that most of our dorms that have that are on the North Avenue, so Riverview, Cambridge, Kenilworth, and those have some interesting arrangements because our foundation owns them. so it gets a little more complicated. There's not a state property. In Madison, for example, the state has been able to come in, and Lowell Hall is just boom. They're moving people out. So ours is a little more complicated, and we are continuing to allow, with very careful spacing of students, very careful sequencing, students to move their materials and their possessions out. So that's another category of activity. A big one.
So one of the things, Mark, that we understand is you're going to reimburse some of those fees. This is going to have enormous impact on your budget. What are you doing about that?
Yeah, so the refunds are being administered now, and on meal plans and dorms, the costs are tremendous, as you can appreciate, across the system. In fact, I think the latest estimate is north of 80 million for the residence portion alone. So those are revenues that normally are coming in. So you can imagine the impact on the commensurate impact, what that's going to have to do for some of the payroll issues downstream here. But that's one of the tough parts of this. So you're absolutely right. And meanwhile, on the segregated fee side, we've got a little bit different of a challenge there, because that's associated with bonding and some of the things that are necessary for that. A big question that's been in a lot of people's mind: every May we have 2 ceremonies for commencement that have 10,000 people in the Panther Arena. And we had to make a decision based on all the other events. And you're seeing that now with Summerfest. You're seeing that with so many summer events that are really being pushed back. We had to make a decision because of all the vendors and all the travel, all the rental equipment. So we made a decision to postpone our May commencement. I just sent a message out yesterday, and people are very relieved that we're going to either do something in the fall, or we will triple up, not double up, but triple up the December commencement. Not everybody might appreciate that the May commencement, we actually do 2, because we've got so many people that graduate, where the December commencement is just 1. So we may actually add in a lot of additional friends. But we don't know what the arena, the Wisconsin Center District right now is not able to talk about availability, because everything is being booked back. So our initial thought was maybe into the summer, August, but that's too soon. The uncertainty, we just decided let's push it later in the fall, perhaps put that in light, with our homecoming later in the fall. So we're doing contingency planning. We had a big meeting this morning. Another group meets later this week. So those are things that are important. And then, one of the other issues, and we're seeing a lot of national attention to this, is the questions around student employee pay, as well as our employee pay. And what we've designated is that for those folks who cannot work right now, and this of course is not faculty who are continuing to do their work online, but for a lot of our employees that can't come to work, we're providing a couple of weeks of additional pay. Now, how long that can be continued, that's a big question right now with the revenues off. But short term, if we could turn this around, that's great. But there will be long-term consequences because of, to your point earlier, the refunds and what we're having to give back is going to have some big consequences.
What are you thinking in terms of how this will permanently impact the way you are forced to operate?
One thing that occurred to me pretty quickly was, for a number of reasons, campuses across the country had not gone online wholesale. They had portions, and as I mentioned earlier, we're the largest in the state with 11,000 students online. That's pretty significant. But several things will happen. People, including students and faculty who didn't want to go online for whatever reason, are now there. And so
Hmm.
immediately, some people are going to ultimately say, hey, it's not so bad. Again, on both sides, the faculty and the student side. So as everybody's in this new world, and you've already had the Arizona States, and you had Southern New Hampshire University, and these other online providers, as well as third-party providers, I think it's going to become a crowded landscape. Do we have first mover advantage? Are we seizing the moment? So the positives as I look forward is it's not just going online in a binary or dichotomous way. It's how effectively you go online. It's how well you teach. It's how well you create not only cultures of learning, but cultures of care, cultures of community,
Hmm.
identity. All of that is so hard. Somebody said it quite well in a call we had the other day. Higher ed is right now breaking relationships by necessity. We are breaking that comfort, that if you will, that environment where you know there was regularity, there was the norm, you knew people, there was safety in numbers in the classroom. Well, it's all fragmented now. It's all disconnected. Ironically, you know, in a connected virtual world, we're all fragmented. So how effectively can we move forward? And so as far as silver linings, those who can move quickly and effectively and make decisions in this kind of environment, I think really are at an advantage. There's some campuses that are wondering if they're going to go online. How will they survive? Sorry, game over. It's really speed is really important right now. That's probably true across a lot of different areas. I think the other aspect and what we've been trying to do is communicate virtually daily separate messages in part to things that are unique and important to the students, but then those things that are important to faculty and staff, as well as our communities, our alumni, the larger community, keeping people informed. And so we're really careful and working daily on those types of messages. And sometimes we have common messages and sometimes it's just for those particular areas. At the same time, trying to be reflective about this a little bit is hard as we're dealing with brush fires. And I use that metaphor in the sense that, you know, if brush fires get out of hand, they become a larger conflagration. We're doing
Hmm.
everything we can to slow that and to keep these manageable. But boy, the landscape shifts every day. What are the state aids going to be? What are the federal support going to be? Think about University of Wisconsin system. We're the largest employer with 40,000 people. If we go into challenged areas, many of these campuses are the largest employers in the respective communities. That's a big deal. Can the state help? Should the state help? Given that the legislature is clearly going to be looking at infrastructure, job creation, and other things as we look long term at this. I do have to remain, though, optimistic in the sense that higher ed is going to continue to be a really important part of the answer in the future. It's in terms of the digital skills, or in terms of the
Hmm.
core essence of what the new economy is going to be, the new normal, or I should say the next normal, you know, because it's going to be quite a bit different, I think, than any of us can even imagine right now.
Than we had been prepared for. So you raise an interesting point that the way forward is going to be new, innovative partnerships and collaborations. Have you identified any GMC members or any other folks within our local ecosystem who you believe are going to be vital to the success of the university or your students or even your faculty?
Absolutely. There's at least two different facets that I would point out. And let me just mention, if it sounds like I'm saying everything goes online in the future, let me back up and say, I do believe there is going to be clearly a need for us to resume some normalcy in terms of that.
Hmm.
But I think the landscape will be different. I think we're seeing already, I heard the first campus declared fiscal exigency. It happens to be my alma mater, Central Washington University. I was a little stunned to see that last night. They're on the quarterly system and they have a huge reliance on students from Seattle. So that's a big factor for them. But the GMC members, and this I think people should take heart. Number one, the Higher Ed Regional Alliance, of which Julia Taylor has been so pivotal, and the GMC is our fiscal agent. This is critically important as we look at the future. And we had a call with the presidents and chancellors of 18 higher ed institutions late last week. It was on Thursday. Everybody was at the table, and everybody, despite our issues and our respective campuses, the enthusiasm for us to have continued regional collaboration across higher ed is higher than ever before. So I'm really pleased with that. The other piece is on the business community and the way that we have the partnerships with the major employers across this region, all of whom are members of GMC. I think this is going to be something where we help with alignment. So what we're hearing, for example, is can we put workshops together? Can we go online? Can we provide skills that are dramatically in short supply right now? Now, the dust hasn't settled. We don't know what all those needs are going to be, but I do think issues that are different than what we'd seen before in high demand, mental health, buffering resources and things to help individuals cope with great stresses in the workplace. That had not been on our radar 6 months ago. I'm sorry, but that's like one of the number one needs surfacing right now. And across the universities in the region, we've got some pretty good skill sets in terms of those areas. So those are some examples. I also want to recognize that organizations, Elmer, that you're driving and familiar with, Spark, Scale Up, talk about valuable and absolutely needed. We're going to have to think about, and historically, a lot of the future is already, our future depends on the Scale Up and Spark initiatives. And now it's going to be even more important as some of the major employers are pushed on their heels a little bit. But I think the answer is going to be local businesses that can employ people who have been tremendously displaced. What a great opportunity for us to have to build on the frameworks that you've helped establish and lead. So I think the GMC is going to play a vitally important role and look forward to continuing to work with both the higher ed leaders as well as you and other leaders across GMC to help be parts of the answer in the next economy and the way things are going to play out.
You are always the great cheerleader, and I'm so grateful to you for being that. So here you are, you've got an audience of GMC members, and they hold two roles. They hold the role of leaders of the largest organizations in our region, but many of them are also parents of college-going students or current college students. What's the quiet thing that you would want to make sure that they understand from your unique perspective as the chancellor of the university?
Probably three things. Number one, we're focusing on safety first and foremost. That's the driving issue for us, to make sure that people are receiving the right care and the right social distancing, the right types of environmental support. The second one with that is foundational, kind of Maslow hierarchy of needs. People need to be taking care of themselves and staying healthy. But the second aspect from an educational perspective is one of continuity. We don't want things to be disrupted to any greater extent than we can perhaps help manage. We know that 18 to 25-year-olds, which is the majority of undergraduates, that's a tough time in somebody's life. You haven't got that career started. You're learning a lot, and we have great expectations. If you think about all the things that are happening in terms of students' lives and minds at that point, we want to assure individuals at UWM, and frankly across, I think I speak on behalf of a lot of the higher ed institutions in this region, we're going to continue. Students are going to graduate. They're going to have no disruption with respect to that. The third aspect is long-term. The long-term elements of higher ed, I would ask GMC members to as we're all taking a look and all have great uncertainty, it's too early to tell, but we're going to be there. And we're going to be there in a way that provides continued talent, continued research, continued community engagement in ways that are important across healthcare, the arts, business, manufacturing, nonprofits, social service agencies, that we're going to be there. We've adapted. We go back, our roots trace back to the late 1800s, and we're going to continue to evolve as the needs are there. So that's the message that I boil it down to in those three areas.
I think that's a fantastic message. So just to keep it light for a second, Mark, you're having to accommodate a new work style. You're working from home. You've been doing all these video calls. Any tips, anything you've found that's been particularly useful?
Well, I think there's a whole new world of working remotely. And, you know, there's one of the comments that I have with a number of colleagues is, as we're getting used to this, how hard is it going to be to get back into that tie? How hard is it going to be to work through some of those traditional dress types of things? There's a little silver lining there. But I'll tell you, the evening events that are off right now have completely filled in. We have so many evening meetings and calls. It's still staying pretty intense. I do think that if I can offer something that I think is so important, historically, we would have phone calls or we'd have meetings and we'd take a lot of things for granted. The importance of personal face-to-face communication, the importance of reaching out to individuals that right now, because of urgency and frankly, a lot of adrenaline and triaging, we're in kind of the shock mode. We've got to do, as we move through as things settle down, we've got to think about who are we not talking to, who is at risk, who are we not involving in decision making. And I can appreciate across the thousands and thousands of people in my organization just how challenging that is. But it's true if you're an organization or a shop of 5 or 7 or 12 people, 400 or 150,000. We are at great risk of losing that fabric of connectivity. And I do think we're going to see continued stresses, mental health issues, people that need that groundedness. So that to me is really important, aside from the importance of netiquette, muting your microphone when you're not talking, and just, you know, waiting your turn, all of that kind of stuff. I think there's some really big, deep issues. The final comment that I'd make is what I've challenged our campus to do is to think about this as an opportunity to reflect and think about how can we better uphold our guiding values? How can we better reduce equity gaps that exist in this community? How can we better educate, you know, given our mission to educate and have access? How can we better do that? We're not all frantic and scrambling right now on all these issues. We have time in some parts of our organization to really have thoughtful reflection on that. And I think this is a good opportunity to use that.
I love it. So Mark, I want to give you, I want to thank you so much on behalf of all GMC and the team for taking some time out of your busy day to talk to us. I want to give you an opportunity to have the last word before I sign off. So whatever you'd like to share.
Thank you, Elmer. I appreciate your interest. I appreciate everything you're doing, your leadership, and the work that we're doing together. I also wish everybody the best in this uncertain, challenging time. You know, a Winston Churchill quote comes to mind, and pardon the little bit rough language that he used, but basically he said, when you find yourself in hell, to move forward, you just take one step at a time. And while this isn't hell, this is certainly the most uncertain time we've faced in our careers and lives. And it's just one day, one step at a time, while thinking ahead about the great things that we all are doing together and the importance of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and helping shape the world. So thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mark.